Hey there, welcome to SUPlift, a place where ideas meet with resources to create something special. By the time you are watching this video, our platform will have already been up and running, so hop on, create your free account as a founder, investor, or a talent, and let us know if we can help you with anything. We will do everything in our power to help. Anyway, today on SUPlift Talks, we will be talking about sustainability. Our guest, Agata Bendik, is a venture associate at Sustainable Ventures in London. Hey, Agata, it's nice to have you here. Thank you.
Hi. No, thank you so much. I'm very glad to be here.
Great. First question. Let's get straight to business. Could you tell us what does a venture associate do and how to become one, and what does a venture associate do in Sustainable Ventures?
That's a great question. I reckon that that's not really say much when you think about the venture associate. And then another part is that my role is actually divided into a couple of different roles. So first of all, a venture associate is usually a person working with different ventures. So ventures like startups is kind of the lingo that we are using. So it could be startups or SMEs, so small, medium enterprises. And then associate is just a level of my role. So as a venture associate, my role is primarily working with startups, helping them develop and acting as as that support in their investing journey or in their development strategic journey as well. So basically, that's it.
All right. And would you say that Sustainable Ventures is an accelerator or an incubator?
It's all of it, actually. It's an investment company. So we do invest into pre-seed stage clean tech startups. So just to tell you a little bit more. So clean tech startups are, newly developed companies that use technology to address, the climate crisis or climate change. So we do investments into those clean tech companies. We do have an accelerator connector with that, but we also have accelerators working with, for example, BASE, which is a government-sponsored accelerator that I'm leading right now. But we also have an incubator, and that's a program that we're running together with the ebook Trust, addressing fuel poverty and energy efficiency. So these are very early stage ideas that we are trying to incubate. So I would say it's kind of all of it, and it's just the common denominator is that clean tech part that we are addressing.
Okay, so who can actually apply to you? If I have an idea, just an idea, but not a single MVP or I don't know, no traction whatsoever, can I apply to Sustainable Ventures?
Of course. I mean, if you're based in the UK, you can really just reach out to any one of us and ask, where would you fit in our organization? And so the EBICO Trust, the EBICO incubator program is really a good place for you to be. If you have an idea, if you've been working around or in London, you can join our Better Futures program. And that's an accelerator that gives you 12 hours of support in strategic areas or maybe investment areas, design. We can also provide that sort of support to kind of maybe pre-seed but post-MVP stage. If you're looking to raise money, as lots of startups actually do, need that initial kick of, a bit of support, but also the money investment, then our sustainable accelerator is something that you definitely would look to do. And that is an investment of around 120 to 150,000 pounds. Unfortunately, we're only based in the UK, and you would need to be SEIS or EIS eligible, but that's something that we can also help you with.
Okay, so then the question is, if you are based in UK,
Mm-hmm.
does it mean that a single person within a startup, within a company, should be a UK national, or it doesn't really matter and the company has to be based within the UK?
It really doesn't matter. I think that in my experience working with startups and the innovation world in the UK, funnily enough, I would say that there are lots and lots of international people like myself working in the innovation space, which is really nice because you really get to meet lots of different people with different opinions, different experiences, especially in addressing the climate change and the climate crisis. I think that having a perspective of people from different areas, different continents really matters, because very often we see climate change as something, that's only related to one area or one part of the world, but is actually it is global. So I believe that having that overview and having that exposure is also super important.
Okay, so the company has to be UK based no matter what nationals are working within it.
No matter. I mean, of course, there are things like visas and work permits, which after Brexit, I think have not gotten any better. I mean, everyone's welcome here. And of course, everyone will get the same sort of support from an organization like my own or multiple different organizations that work with innovation and startups across the UK.
All right. Great. So I hope that if anybody from UK is watching us, they may step into your doors in the next couple of weeks or months.
Yeah, that would be great.
All right, let's go to the actual questions about startup ecosystem. So if you look from the sustainable perspective, how did the startup community and startup environment change within the last couple of years?
That's a really brilliant question because, for someone who's been involved in the innovation space across the UK, but also in Denmark, in the last 5 years, I have definitely seen a lot of change that, really happened before my eyes, but before really sitting down and thinking about it, it's very difficult to understand what actually happened. So quite recently, actually, I created a series of different speeches that I'm giving to students, and I kind of took that route from of entrepreneur from early 2000s through to 2010, and how it looks right now and then how it's going to look in the future. So sort of looking at the generations of founders, but also people who work in the innovation space. And I think that the first change that I've realized happened is that, and it is close to my home as well, so that's why I'm saying it, is that most of the startups currently working with us or that I worked in the previous roles have that kind of sustainability focus. Maybe not always focused. They do not always want to change the world for the better or accelerate that change, but at least they have that sort of, silver lining of, we do this, but then at the same time, we also help the environment. Or at least they try to be, carbon neutral negative, or they're trying to do something that is also helping the society. So that's change number one. Then another change that I've seen is that back in the days, and always makes me laugh when I see, something like play hard, work hard mentality, wake up at 4 a.m. to then do an hour of gym and then go and work for 12 hours and then do the same every single day. And you can't take any time off. I think with the whole process of, mental health getting more mainstream and talking about it, became less taboo than it used to be. I believe that that kind of work-life balance became something that is so important right now. And I'm glad that young people like ourselves, but also people that I meet, do understand how important that work-life balance is. So I believe that, that kind of sustainability part, and then also work-life balance, and also the fact that you don't want to burn out. We do, we get a lot of stress through our work lives. We are put, under so much stress and responsibilities that we need to take time for ourselves, cut off social media, cut off everything else, and just focus on what we really want, what we really need.
All right. So after your first point, there is a natural question that comes into my mind, which is, of course, everyone nowadays talks about sustainability within business. Maybe not everyone, but a lot of people within the startup community and then business overall, and politics, international relations, of course, as well. And sometimes I feel that because there is quite a lot of funds and money in sustainability, in saving the planet, it has been a little bit of a gimmick. I mean, let's say that our startup is green, it's sustainable, so then we can, get many grants and apply for some governmental help, or accelerators, incubators will look at us more in a more acceptable way. So where do you put this kind of a point where a startup is believable as a sustainable one, or when it goes to more of, just using it as a way to succeed?
I'm so glad that you asked that question, Jacob, because I think that, first of all, it is my personal vendetta against all of the companies that try to greenwash and use greenwashing to, attract different customers to inflate their prices, but most importantly, just to mislead the customer. And I, whenever I see that in my professional life, in my personal life, I just make sure that I take note of that, and of course learn from their mistakes and let them know if possible. So absolutely, I think that there's quite a lot of that gimmicky mindset when it comes to making things, making products, making services sustainable. And then, unfortunately, at the moment, we are still not yet in the place where we have a global standards for sustainability practices. I mean, I'm pretty sure that you might have heard about B Corp, which is a standardized certification that you can apply for and then ultimately gain. That kind of measures your impact that you have on society and the environment, which is quite important for all companies to have. It's not only about the pollution that you emit, or carbon or CO2 emissions. It's also about how you treat your employees. How does your supply chain look like? And I think that for a company to just say that they're sustainable, it means nothing, because without their actual input and measuring their carbon emissions, and then also measuring how are they scoring in terms of the supply chain sustainability as well. It really is important for companies to put the number next to their sustainability claim, so-called claim. So B Corp is the first one, and it is a global company that everyone can actually go in and check what are their measures are like. So, to see what do we as a company need to improve without even going and applying for the certification. There are multiple different ways to standardize companies' operations and services and products, as I said. So I believe that without putting the number next to your sustainability claim, I believe that it should almost be ostracized and scrutinized to say that you're not sustainable unless you say that, yes, we are paying a living wage. Yes, we've checked all of our supply chain, and everything seems to be in order. No, we are not using any sort of processes that can be not tracked, for example. And then there's another part of it. So companies often want to tell you that something is recyclable or it is recycled. I see it every day where companies use the word recyclable instead of recycled, because recyclable means that it is just virgin plastic, which unfortunately means that it is not good at all. Or, biodegradable. Very often consumers don't even know these words, don't even know what it means. But if it's printed on a gray or brown paper and it says biodegradable, we automatically think that it's great. Unfortunately, when we see a biodegradable plastic, what it means is that it's industrially biodegradable, which then means that it probably won't actually end up in, biodegraded. It will end up in a landfill and it will pollute, even more. So it is important for the consumer to be educated. It is important for the society in general to be educated. But I think that the biggest change will actually come from the companies themselves. So as a consumer, I would just like for us all to make conscious decisions and not fall for, super gimmicky statements like biodegradable. And I think that's why it became a gimmick, because we are not educated enough, and the companies exploit that and use us because they know that it's super easy to do.
So if you were to talk about percentages, let's say about a ratio, the startups that come into your way, into your everyday work,
yeah.
What would be the ratio of the ones that actually use sustainability as a mean to help, mean to develop, and mean to, let's say, save the environment, and the other ones? What would be the ratio?
So funnily enough, I think that the standard of our programs and of sustainable ventures is super high, which means that I would say that maybe less than 10 or 5% of startups that come through my way do not or cannot claim that they are actually sustainable. So one practice that we do with most of the startups that we're working with is something called sustainability impact report or sustainability report. More and more companies, especially corporates, have been working with something like that for quite a few years now. Startups just learn how to use it. So the impact report basically talks about your impact that your startup or company has on the planet, and whether that's environment and also whether that's society. It's up to you to determine. And very often we use theory of change. So that's a methodology that helps you understand what has changed since you started selling your products, services. And then also using the sustainable development goals is quite important when you think about, mapping out what sort of change you are striving towards. So looking at all of the SDGs and then, not just picking the most that you're addressing, because looking at the website, I could already check whether that's going to work or not. But picking 3 or 4 different SDGs and just making sure that you are really working on them is quite crucial. So I would say not that few. Fortunately, I think that, in the UK, the market's quite saturated with clean tech at the moment, which makes it easier to filter through all of the, bad clean tech or want to be clean tech startups.
Hey, so not that many. My understanding was that it's going to be a bit more, but that's great then. That's fantastic. It's good that you have high standards and people know about this. Okay, so when you have the startup that actually is not a gimmick and doesn't use environment as a gimmick, how does a startup founder embed sustainability in their company? How do you do that?
I mean, I'm pretty sure that there are a couple of different ways to do it. So one thing that I see it as is a sustainability as a core of everything that you do. So in that case, the founders saw a problem, and that problem was already embedded in the sustainability issue, whether that's climate or whether that's a society. And in that way, sustainability is already a very kind of core part of everything that they do. They kind of want to solve an issue, but that issue is, net zero, or making sure that, we can decarbonize our emissions. So that's quite an interesting way of looking at how can we solve the climate change. Another part is companies that are not necessarily working on sustainability issues. So there are your, networking platforms, for example, or any platforms in general that are, peer platforms. They wouldn't necessarily have anything to do with sustainability, but then they can look at other ways to implement it in their operations. And in that case, I would say net zero readiness or net zero strategy would be one of the ways that they could think of, joining the Sustainability Alliance, and then looking at their carbon emissions, because even if it's a SaaS platform and it doesn't necessarily produce, products, it still produces emissions. And so having that pledge to join the Net Zero Alliance is super important. And it could go down even to small things like the way we work or the way we operate or the way we are at the office. There are definitely ways and strategies that we could think about, when you want to join that sustainability movement. Currently, I'm working with Net Zero Readiness Program for companies, so just the standard companies, often working in hospitality around London. And over there, we kind of keep on asking ourselves questions. How can a grocery store become sustainable? How can a hairdresser become sustainable? And in that way, sustainability is not only a thing that people can do when they want to work with high, deep tech. It is something that everyone can really do, which is quite interesting. So in this case, I would say that then looking at your secondary emissions is also quite important. Looking at your supply chain is also really important. So yeah, there are really, this core of whatever the business is doing, but then there's also focusing on, things that you can do as a business that's not necessarily focusing on sustainability.
Okay, and you talk about the Net Zero Alliance?
Net Zero Readiness, yeah.
Readiness, yes. Could you tell us what it is?
Yeah, of course. So net zero is something what also the British government calls, by 2050, we want to be net zero, which means by 2050, we don't want to emit any more carbon, into the atmosphere, which means that, because it is net zero, it means that we need to offset more carbon that we produce. So it doesn't mean that you can't produce any more carbon, because that will not be possible. It means that we basically offset more carbon than we produce. And offsetting carbon is a really broad topic. So I really suggest, people who are interested in it, just checking, how can you actually offset carbon? Is it, planting trees? But I personally don't think that's the best option. So we really need to trust the tech to help us with it. So yes, I think that you as a person could think about becoming net zero by eating less meat and offsetting your carbon emissions. But also companies, and especially big companies and big corporates, should think about it.
Okay, so when I already have my idea, I try to live by the net zero readiness.
Yeah.
What are the possibilities to receive funding as a founder for your sustainable venture?
I would say that, it's a really great question because there are so many different funding routes than many people are not even aware of. We always think of VCs or angels when we think of of startup funding. But then I quite recently became familiar and started working with grants, for example. I'm very lucky to live in the UK, where the UK government and the organization called Innovate UK is putting a lot of money into grant funding for very groundbreaking technologies that really also help that climate change fight. So I would say that looking for any founder, wherever you are in the world, looking at grant funding is extremely helpful and important because it is not free money, unfortunately. It does come with a lot of kind of constraints. You need to work on a specific project. You very often need to secure your match funding, so you only get, an X percentage of your project costs. There's quite a lot of admin work, as with any kind of government job. You need to put in a lot of effort into reporting and monitoring the projects. And of course, if things go wrong, you need to pay it back. But at the same time, it is a great way to kickstart your idea. And it is really important for you to kind of try and go for not only for equity funding, but also for non-equity funding like grants or loans, because very often I see that founders are, put in the position where they make these quick decisions about equity funding that then kind of hound them for the rest of their lives. So bootstrapping for as long as possible is a really good idea. But also when you work on deep tech, on prototyping, on building an MVP, I know that it's almost impossible to get that bootstrapping money. So then searching for grants is really great idea. For anyone based in European Union, I would also suggest Eureka Eurostars, which is a grant available to any member of the European Union state. And it is a really nice process. It is quite convoluted, but at the same time, you can win up to 360,000 euros for your project, which I think is a perfect amount of money to get you started and going on any sort of project, whether it's hardware or software or anything.
So you are one of those people who advocate bootstrapping for as long as possible when the actual traction is going on, and then looking for more institutionalized funding.
Yes, but I wouldn't want to be held accountable for this advice. Sometimes it's just not possible. Of course, there is quite a lot of in-kind support that you can get from accelerators, for example, from the founding team, from any sort of educational institutions. But having worked with multiple startups, working on the startups at the moment, I think that I would try to go as far as possible on as little equity giving away as possible as well. Everyone's different, and I understand that every country has different opportunities. But it is also very important for you to look out for what's happening. And I'm not only talking about the government opportunities. There are companies, for example, like Coca-Cola, who they recently released a competition on the best plastic or biodegradable plastic solution that would then help them transition to no virgin plastic solutions. So in that case, it does not necessarily have to come from the institutions, but it's just always keeping an eye on what's going on, whether that's competitions, whether that's grants, just to build that traction. I think that this is what I would be looking at, or what I would suggest to every founder.
All right. So, not to put you on the spot anymore, let's go back to the sustainable ventures. Tell me what a startup, what process the startup needs to go through to become a sustainable ventures alumni.
Sure. I think there's quite a few ways that you can do that. Well, first of all, for every company that's based in London, we run a program called Better Futures. So if you're a clean tech based in London, the government and actually the Greater London Authority is sponsoring a project or an accelerator that you can partake in and receive that 12 hours of support. So you can do that. You can become an accelerator member if you are being invested into by Sustainable Ventures. So that's also 12 months of very hands-on support from our ventures team, including design and further fundraising and follow-on fundraising. The Educo Trust program is also another part where you can take your idea from just an ideation stage and almost nothing all the way through to your initial investment. So that's another way to become an alumni. But I think what really matters in the ecosystem of sustainable ventures is that we appreciate every single company that comes our way. So whether you are our clients that we've been working on putting a grant application together, whether you're part of our sustainable workspaces and you just want to be, placed in our offices, whether you are just signed up to the newsletter and you kind of follow what we're doing, there's always a place for everyone who wants to be a part of it, whether you have taken part in any of our programs or whether you just came to one of our events at the county hall.
All right. And what tips would you give for the founders that create companies to be fair, in 2022?
Another great question. I'm sure you guys are working on it as well. So I think that's help. It is almost heartbreaking to see how much help there is available at this moment in 2022 and 2020, 2021, and just to see how much help there is available now versus how little help there was back in the days where I just started my career. But I think that the biggest advice that I would give to new founders, especially first-time founders, is that don't do it by yourself. You don't have to do everything by yourself. Found companies like yours where you can find that the bits of information that you need so that you don't need to create the entire process, but you can just follow a process that's been, checked through thousands of times before and it worked for multiple companies. I think that, that sort of mentality where you want to go to your network and speak about your idea to multiple people and not be shy, but also not to think that someone would steal your idea is super important. I believe that the networking and your community already has all the answers that you need in order to at least kickstart with your idea. And then search for different resources. I mean, again, it is really heartwarming to see how much that there is out there at the moment. And I believe that, with the help of other people, you can create really something important. And another thing would be to not spend too much money on building a widget or building a platform before you have that initial traction or validation. Again, I would advocate for bootstrapping for as long as possible. And I would also try to validate as much as you can. So basically go to anyone that you know and then anyone that you don't know who you can see on the street and then ask them about, what they think about your idea. And then asking your mom or your best friend it's not enough. asking someone who can give you constructive feedback, who can, maybe tell you that this is not exactly what they would like, but how to make it better, really will open your mind on different perspectives, because you as a founder always think that your startup is the best and your startup does not need any help at all. And then, I would just say find a mentor, find a team of people who believe in your idea the way you do, and validate. That would be my advice.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Agatha. I think that's all the questions I had for you for today, but probably at some point we will be happy to invite you again to talk a little bit more. Should you have any questions to Agatha, just let us know and we will be happy to pass them through. And just like Agatha said, having in 2022 a community that is happy to a little bit give you this little push, give you maybe a possibility to validate your idea, is an enormous opportunity and a great idea. So if you want, create your account at SUPlift and let us know if we can help. Once again, thank you, Agatha.
Thanks a lot.
Good luck to you.
Cheers.